A Crash Course in Copyright, Part 2, Myths, Facts, and Fair Use. My name is Christy Padron. I'm the Scholarly Communication Librarian at the Florida Atlantic University Libraries. The subtitle is More Copyright Basics for Anyone Who Creates. You may have watched A Crash Course in Copyright, Part 1, The Basics. We pick up from the first webinar and go into these learning outcomes. First, we'll discuss copyright myths and facts. We also identify fair use and how it is applied to reuse works protected by copyright. Disclaimer: the FAU Libraries and its faculty, staff, and administration are not attorneys and cannot interpret the law. And this information is provided for educational purposes only and does not substitute for advice from legal counsel. Copyright in our lives. Copyright frequently makes the news with high-profile court cases that seek damages. Copyright is highly misunderstood or misinterpreted, which may lead to disagreements of sorts, and may be a takedown notice or a lawsuit. To lessen these misunderstandings, this session will discuss copyright myths and facts, and then introduce fair use, a commonly misunderstood yet highly used copyright exception. Copyright defined. They are the legal protections and rights for creators who make an original work in a fixed medium. Tangible works can have a copyright, but not intangible things. A tangible work may include something like a book, an image, a photograph, or a movie, whereas intangible things may be something like an idea, fact, discovery, or process which cannot have copyright protection. The length of time a work has copyright protection depends on its format, the year it was created, and where it was made. Now we'll go into some copyright myths and facts. One common myth is this: I need to label my work with the copyright logo for it to get copyright protection. A work actually gets copyright protection the moment it's tangible. So the moment you write your paper, record your song, you take your picture, it has copyright protection. Putting the copyright logo on a work is a good way to let people know that it does have a copyright, but otherwise that is not required for it to have copyright protection. A second common myth is this: I also have to register my work with the U.S. Copyright Office. It's not required, but necessary for legal situations like a lawsuit or an infringement claim. As mentioned earlier, a work gets copyright protection from the moment it's tangible, so it's not necessary for it to get registered for a copyright. However, if you see that someone is using your copyrighted work without your permission, known as copyright infringement, you would need to register your work for a copyright, especially for a legal situation like a lawsuit. Here's another myth, followed by a fact. My copyright belongs to me forever. Copyright is not forever, and it can be transferred. A copyright holder can transfer their copyright. This frequently happens with journal articles, books, and other publications when authors transfer a copyright to a publisher. It can also happen with other types of works, but they don't always have to. Here's another myth: I own the copyright for all my work. It would depend on if you were the only creator or if someone contributed a lot to it. Also, if you're hired to make or do something for someone else, it may be considered work made for hire. Copyright can also be shared when you worked with others who contributed a significant amount. Work made for hire generally involves a contract where you make something for someone else for a fee, or if you work for them, the copyright would belong to the person who hired you. As a student, the work you do for a research team may belong to the team or organization and not you. Verify these points of sharing and works made for hire at the beginning of a project or a job. Test your know-how. Let's think about what we've discussed so far. For our first scenario, as an assignment for a child literacy course, Felicia and Bob teamed up to write Time with My Abuelos, or grandparents. The professor says it's great and recommends they publish it. Who has the copyright for this book? Think about the details that we have so far in this particular scenario. For the second one, Lisa is a student researcher in a professor's lab. She has been tasked with making some graphs based on some data, which will be used in the primary investigator's final report. Who would likely have the copyright for the graphs? Next, we'll discuss and introduce fair use. Fair use is defined as an exception or exemption in copyright law that allows limited use of works protected by copyright without the permission of the copyright holder. This is outlined in current U.S. copyright law, United States Code 17, Section 107. Fair use applies for limited and transformative purposes. You may be able to use copyrighted works for commentary and critique. This is especially important in college and university settings where people build off the works of others or write about them. Fair use may apply for news. Someone can report on some copyrighted work Fair use also applies in the case of parody. We've heard about the musician Weird Al Yankovic, who takes songs from pop culture, uses slightly different lyrics, and basically makes a play on the lyrics in the song itself. Although copyright law protects intellectual property, fair use gives some allowances to using works protected by copyright without permission. Fair use allows some copying, sharing, clipping, and repurposing depending on the details and purposes of its use. These broad tasks and examples utilize fair use and consider a fair use analysis in making the decision to use others' work. The first broad task would be copying and sharing. In this example, Jean scans her senior class portrait and prints it out one time for a family member who frames it. Although the image has Jean in it, the image actually does belong to the professional photographer who she hired to take it. However, in this example and with certain details, Jane can copy and share this work one time to one person. A second broad task where fair use is applied is in the classroom for teaching and learning. One example would be when you summarize information from an article, use it to support your point and cite it in your assignment. Fair use allows us to take copyrighted work and comment on it. A second example would be your professor gives your class a copy of a book chapter in this face-to-face class to read, and it's from her very own copy of the book. A third broad task would be personal use. My coworker Hector is a Star Wars fan, and let's just say he downloads some Baby Yoda wallpaper from the Star Wars website and uses it as his PC screensaver. A fourth broad task would be remixing and repurposing. The internet search engines like Google take information from web pages and reorganize it as search results. They don't actually set out to do what the web pages do, but they distill information and metadata from it and then reorganize it in search results. A second example of remixing and purposing happens when some recording artists sample judicious amounts of the music of others without committing copyright infringement. Keep in mind that doing these broad tasks in other circumstances might not be considered fair use, depending on the details of use. Fair use analysis. A fair use analysis will help you consider if your intended use of a work protected by copyright. You may determine if fair use applies, if you should get permission to use the work, change how you use the work, use a different work, or do something else. A fair use analysis involves looking at these four factors that I call PANE for short, P-A-N-E. The purpose. You take a look at the purpose of use and a work's character. Are you using a book? Are you trying to reuse an electronic book, a DVD, or a streaming video? And why? Do you want to use it to teach a class? Do you want to use this in your PowerPoint presentation? Are you trying to remix this information into something new? The purpose is where you ask yourself these kinds of questions. The amount and substantiality of a work that will be used is the second part of a fair use analysis. You take a look at how much of a copyrighted work you want to use and if it is the most important part of the copyrighted work or what really makes it unique. You then consider the nature or the type of work. Are you using a creative work like an image, a poem, or a music recording? Or are you using content from a nonfiction book or a scholarly article? You take a look at the nature of your work. Then you think about the effect of reuse on a work's demand or marketability. Is your use of the copyrighted work going to lessen the demand for a particular item? Will it affect the marketability or have fewer people buy a particular work? You take a look at these four things and then you balance it. You get details at this step of the analysis using these 4 points. Fair use analysis objectively reviews these 4 factors for a given situation, so it's always good to get the facts first. The 4 factors have considerations for whether or not a use weighs towards fair use. Fair use, however, is a balance of these factors and not numerically determined. So saying that your use seems to satisfactorily fulfill 3 out of the 4 factors, then it would be fair use. That's not really how it works. You get the objective details for the purpose, amount, and nature, and you consider whether your use weighs towards fair use, as you see on the left side of each of these boxes, or if your use may weigh against fair use, as you see on the right side of these boxes. Your fair use decision will also depend on your tolerance for risk. This may be influenced by how much you know about copyright and fair use, and it may be influenced on if you don't feel so confident that your use would qualify as fair use. A fair use checklist is available at this URL. The image you see here in the yellow border can be found at this URL. You can use it, print it, and keep it so you can keep track of your fair use analysis whenever you want to use a copyrighted work. Copyright myths, facts, and fair use. Keep in mind that fair use is also important for promoting the following. Free speech. We should be able to comment and critique the things that we read. Fair use is also important for innovations and new knowledge. Most ideas are inspired and build on the ideas of previous ones. The same goes for creativity and cultural expression. And finally, fair use is very important for education. Students and scholars always build their new work on what previously was done and use it to support it. And then they also cite the work. Instructors and teachers need to use copyrighted works for their teaching. Understanding the basics of intellectual property and copyright will help you respect the rights creators have over their work, whether the works are yours or by someone else. Finally, you can feel more confident about fair use and intellectual property. Debunk copyright myths by using authoritative sources for your intellectual property and copyright questions. Here's some copyright information that's available to you all. The FAU Library's Copyright Research Guide can be found at this URL. It provides authoritative information and links on the following topics such as fair use. We also have a fair use analysis page. The Copyright Research Guide also provides information about how to request permission to reuse copyrighted works. It also introduces the concept of work made for hire and copyright law and exceptions. For those who instruct or who are teachers, the research guide, Copyright for Teaching and Learning, is available and presents copyright topics with a teaching context in mind. On the web, the U.S. Copyright Office provides the current copyright law. Its circulars provide explanations on various aspects of copyright. It also provides information on how you could register your work for a copyright. The Stanford University Libraries has a good series of web pages on copyright and fair use. It is written a little bit more in layman's terms. Finally, the Works Made for Hire circular is available from the U.S. Copyright Office. The FAU Library does have a variety of books in its collection that you could check out. We have some books from the NOLO Legal series, which is kind of like a do-it-yourself legal guides. The Copyright Handbook, What Every Writer Needs to Know, is available at the Boca Raton campus. And then we have another title, Copyright, What Everyone Needs to Know. You can look in the library catalog through the library's webpage to find more titles that we may have and also some ebooks. If you need help, you can go to the FAU Library's homepage at library.fau.edu. You can chat, text, or email your questions to us through our Ask a Librarian service. You can also meet with us one-on-one by requesting a consultation or even a presentation on this topic, or contact your campus library or a library department for more information. For those of you who need to do this for extra credit, we do have a copyright quiz available for you. Results will be sent in a few minutes, and a certificate is sent for answering 4 out of 5 questions correctly, or 80%. Thank you for joining us for a crash course in copyright Part 2, Myths, Facts, and Fair Use. My name is Christy Padron. I'm the Scholarly Communication Librarian. Please contact me or any of my colleagues at the FAU Libraries for more information.